So one of the technologies that we frequently work with is OAuth. And so I wanted to do a little bit of work with some OAuth code and kind of show how to do a really basic OAuth authentication. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a new Rails application. While that's generating, just explain some of the background and details of OAuth. So I've got directory here on my computer. We're just going to do Rails new, I'm going to call it try OAuth, and that'll go out and build us a basic Rails application. So we're going to start from scratch. So if you've never read or seen OAuth, you have probably used it without even knowing about it. Every time you see a button that says sign in with Facebook or sign in with Google or sign in with GitHub, that is OAuth in the background. So this came about because a long time ago we used to build applications that needed access to third parties, and we would just ask users for usernames and passwords, which resulted in giant security holes, because then you would have third parties holding on to your Gmail password, for example, and that's a really bad thing. So what OAuth does is it first allows you to use a third party like Facebook or Google as a login provider. But then it also will give you a token, and you can use that token to access the APIs at Google or Facebook or Twitter or wherever. OAuth also involves something called scopes. I won't talk about scopes very much today, but you'll see it in the documentation if you go to implement OAuth. A scope simply says, allow this application access to these specific APIs. So when you do OAuth with Facebook, you can add scopes, and you can say, I actually only want the user's name. And then Facebook will only provide you with the name. And that makes the dialogue that is presented to the user a little less heinous, because if you ask for all kinds of scopes, then when that dialogue pops up, Facebook will tell the user, hey, this app is asking for access to your name and your email and your friends' emails and your entire life's history, and all of a sudden the user probably won't want to install your application. So it's important that you use scopes appropriately. Okay, so having said that, let's go ahead and let's open up our new Rails application here. Get it on the right window. There we go. Oh, whoops, not there. Sorry. Okay, so now we can focus just on this application. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the gem file, because we're going to need to add a couple of gems to support OAuth. Lucky for us, in the Ruby on Rails world, there's a gem called OmniAuth that handles pretty much all of the OAuth for us. So I'm just going to add a couple of OmniAuth related gems. First one is this OmniAuth gem right here. That's the base gem. And then I'm going to add OmniAuth Canvas. So Canvas is a learning management system. We do a lot of work with Canvas, and it allows me to show a couple of the more advanced configuration options with OmniAuth. So I'm going to use the OmniAuth Canvas gem today rather than Facebook or Twitter or whatever. So let's just do a quick bundle install. Now I'll go out and install everything. So that was pretty fast. That's nice. Now we have everything that we need in terms of libraries to kick things off. We do need to add an initializer. So the initializer will tell OmniAuth exactly how it is supposed to behave. So let's go ahead and add that. So I go into my initializers directory. I add OmniAuth RB. Okay, so then I just need to do Rails application.config.middleware. Okay, so this says, as a request comes through the stack, we're going to add this little piece of middleware called OmniAuth Builder. It's OmniAuth Builder. Okay. Oops. Stop it. Sorry, Sublime will not stop auto-completing for me. Wow. That's just great. There we go. Okay, there. For some reason, Sublime decided it wanted to take over. For each one of the gems, you have to add a provider entry. So in this case, our provider is going to be Canvas because we've added the Canvas gems. So we have Canvas, and then we've got Rails. Well, sorry, the first parameter here is going to be a key, and the second is going to be a secret. You could hard code them into the initializer, but that's probably a bad idea. We're going to put them in Rails secrets, so I can do Rails application.secrets.OAuth key. And then I'm going to have to go add it to the secrets file, of course. And then rails.application.secrets.OAuth secret. Okay. So in a lot of cases, that's all that you'll need is just those two pieces right there. You'll just need a key and a secret. This is also where I would provide scopes. In the case of the Canvas OmniAuth gem, which we actually wrote, you have to provide it with a little bit more information. What's really nice is I can give it a setup function. So I can do setup, give it a lambda here. And then when this is called, OmniAuth is going to provide me with the current environment. So that will allow me to look up anything that I need from the environment, or set anything that I need on the environment. In this case, we're going to need to set in the OmniAuth.strategy. So this is just configuration for the different OmniAuth gems. Inside of the Canvas OmniAuth gem, there is an OmniAuth strategy client options site that we need to configure. And we have to do this because each Canvas consumer has their own subdomain. So different universities, like Utah State, will have their own Canvas instance, and it'll be something like usu.instructure.com. With other OAuth providers, you don't have to configure this because it's always going to go to Facebook or it's always going to go to Twitter. But with Canvas, you have to configure it because you're going to go to different Canvas instances and they exist at different subdomains. And this is your opportunity to set that up. So we have env OmniAuth strategy.options and client options.site. So that is just the set of configuration that's required by that specific gem. So there's nothing magical about it. I just happen to know that I have to set client options.site, and we're going to set it to the Atomic Jolt instance. And I'm just going to hard code this. Like that. Okay, so in a real application, you could actually use this as a chance to do something more interesting. I'm going to comment this out for a second and show you a piece of code that you might want to use. I'm just going to copy paste this in. So you can see that it's a similar bit of code, but we wrap the environment in a rack request. And then I can do things like request.params.accountID. And so maybe I have accounts. I should say account. Okay. Maybe I have accounts in my database. And the OAuth ID key, or I'm sorry, the key and secret and the URL are specific to an account. And that would give me the opportunity to configure each of those options on a per account basis. This is really powerful because then I can do multi-tenant applications relatively easily and then set the different OAuth options based on individual accounts. And maybe I find those based on an account ID or a subdomain or different domains, so on and so forth. Anyway, so I'm going to remove that. We're going to go back to our more basic code here where we just hard code things. Okay, so this will initialize OmniAuth when my application starts. We have our key, we have our secret, and we have the Canvas site. So now I need to go into my secrets YAML file, and I have to add key and secret, which I have already set up. Let's drop these in for development. I'm going to take this off screen for 1 sec because you want to keep these secret. So I'm going to paste those in, which I realize you can't see, but it's simply just adding another bit of configuration to secrets.yml, and then away you go. All right, so now when I start this thing up, now we're getting there. No, I must have spelled something wrong. I think that's middleware, not middle. Yep. So there we go. .use. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. So now we know the application will start. So just really quick, the mistake I made there was to not add the rest of this. So Rails application config middleware use. This is how you configure middleware in any Rails application, whether it's OmniAuth or there's Cores middleware. There's a whole bunch of different middleware that you can install in your application. All right, so now the next piece, let's go ahead and add a controller to handle the callback. So the way OAuth works is the user is going to either click a link or be redirected to a link that will further redirect them out to the third party, in this case out to our Canvas instance, where they will be asked, do they want to allow this application to use to allow this application access to the API and let the user log in. If the user clicks yes, it's going to redirect back to the application that we're writing, and so we need an endpoint for it to come back to. So if I go into controllers, I can add a sessions controller. And in the sessions controller, we're just going to add a simple create method. And this is going to be our callback. So when we get back here, let's just go ahead and assign a session, and we'll call it something like auth hash is going to equal request.env. And you have to use a string. You can't use a symbol here because it's actually a string in this hash. So OmniAuth.auth. So this OmniAuth.auth as part of the request.env is set up for us during that callback phase. So OmniAuth does that for us. This thing is going to have all kinds of data in it. It's going to have the user's name and email and API token. It just depends what you ask for. It's going to be filled with all kinds of data. And then once that's done, we're going to go ahead and redirect to the root path. Okay, so we got to go configure some routes in here. Let's get rid of all the comments, and then just add our sessions in there. Let's go ahead and add a root index as well. Crap, sorry. Home index, there we go. And I'm going to add one more route, and then we're going to go implement some of this stuff. So get to auth/provider/callback, and that's going to go to sessions create. There. Okay. So what that does is it simply maps this callback URL into that create method that we just wrote in the sessions controller. The reason we have to do that is this is going to be our callback. This is where we're going to come back to. This provider is going to be Canvas. If we were using Twitter or Google, then that provider would be Twitter or Google or Facebook or whatever. So we just need, for that URL, once we hit that callback, to actually hit the create method of the sessions controller. So that's why it's set up that way. Of course, now we're going to have to We're going to need to add a home controller at this point, so let's do that really quickly. All right, and this is just going to have a simple index method just for a home page. So now we need to go add that view. So view home. Okay, so let's just add hello world right there. Let's make sure that we can actually get to the home index. So bring up my web browser. And there's our hello world. Okay, so we have our basic page up and running. Let's change this so that you can't actually get to this page unless you are logged in. So I can add a new before filter up here, or before action, and authorize. Okay, so now we need to go write authorize. But we might want to use that in multiple locations later on, so let's put that in the application controller. And authorize. All right, so let's just check the session, because if you remember right, back in our sessions controller, we have this session auth hash. So if that's present, then we'll know that we are logged in. So if session has a key auth hash, then the user is logged in. All right, so we probably also want to do something like if they're not logged in, then we need to probably redirect them. So let's change this a little bit. So let's say this is if you are authorized, and then our and our authorize method can say, let's redirect the user unless they are authorized. Okay, so now we need a place to redirect them to. So this would be basically, hey, go sign in. But we don't have a login, and we don't have really any concept of users in our system. That's okay, because we're going to depend on Canvas to handle our login. So we need to redirect you to that OAuth, to initialize that OAuth process. With OmniAuth, that's relatively simple. The URLs always look like this. It's going to be auth and then the provider. So in our case, it's Canvas. So auth/Facebook, auth/Google, whatever it is that you're using, whoever it is that you want to OAuth with, that's what you would put there. And you could write some helpers for this. And I think if you use Devise, there are helpers that generate these URLs. It's just, we're not using Devise just to keep things simple here. All right, so that's our application controller. So now if I hit this home page, with any luck, there we go. We've been redirected out to Canvas, and it says, you are authorizing this app as, there's my email, it's requesting access to your account. So I can hit authorize. I'm going to go ahead and hit authorize. That should redirect me back. It says unable to auto-load this, so we'll go fix that. But you notice that it did redirect me back, and so that piece of it at least works. Okay, so now I got to figure out what's going on here. Sessions control. Let's see, probably spelled sessions wrong. There we go. Okay, so let's try this again. Let's try to hit the home page, hit authorize, and now we get our hello world. So we're authorized. But just to prove that we're actually authorized, let's grab some of the data that is returned to us from Canvas. So if I open up my index ERB here, then we can take out our hello world and we can do things like paragraph tag, and remember we put everything that is returned to us from Canvas, in this case, from the third-party provider, in this auth hash. So now we can pull stuff out. So we used a symbol to store that in the hash, but everything in the OmniAuth hash is actually addressed via strings. So if this looks a little funny, that's why. If you tried to do this, you'll get nothing. That'll be nil. So we have to use strings. There's an info object, and in that info object, there's going to be a name. Now, the different providers can return different values. Most of them will actually return a name. Canvas does not always do that. Sometimes it just returns an email. And sure enough, you can see the email right there. Let's go ahead and do one more thing. Let's go and grab my avatar. So everything that's contained in the info object is basically normalized across all the providers. Then if there's extra information that is not part of that kind of normalized data set, you can still get at it. It's going to provide it to you in this raw info object. So avatar URL. And now, when I refresh, there's my picture. So that's basically how you handle OAuth. If you want to see this again, just to prove everything works, let's grab an incognito window at localhost 3000. Here it's asking me to log in. Remember, we're in incognito. Before I was actually logged into Canvas. This time I'm not logged into Canvas. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Log in. And once again, it's going to ask me, do you want to authorize this application? I click that button. Redirects me back. There's that name. There's my avatar. So relatively simple. We didn't have to do a lot of work to get fairly powerful functionality. When you integrate this into your application, it's highly likely that you'll have more stuff. You're probably not just going to store the hash in a session, the returned hash in a session. So you might want to actually create users in your database. Luckily, Devise does integrate really well with OAuth. So if you install Devise to handle all of your users, then you can also add OmniAuth and get all kinds of niceties with that. Okay, are there any questions about this whole process?
Yeah, so right now the application controller is handling redirecting unauthorized users, right?
Correct.
So what if we wanted to, I haven't done a lot of Rails, but I'm not quite sure how we would implement like a protected route. Like how can we have non-protected and protected routes, I guess?
So what you would do is just take this authorize and put it as a before action on anything that you want to protect. You just do that.
Oh, okay. So you kind of oh, okay, cool. Great, thank you.
You see the configuration file again.
The initializer.
OmniAuth, yeah.
Is that in documentation about how to set that up in the OmniAuth gem, or did you just kind of figure that out?
There is documentation, but I did have to figure out some of this stuff. This is actually, it took us a while to figure this stuff out. And even recently when I was doing, let's see, where is it?
That's what I'm missing.
Yeah.
Did you scroll over to the whatever settings is in the edge there? Setup.
Setup.
Just
Yeah.
invoke.
Here, let me show you this one too, because this one's easier to read. This one took me a little bit longer to figure out, just because I had to go figure out what these options are: client ID, client secret, whatnot.
Are you going to have this all up on GitHub?
Yeah, I'm going to post this to GitHub.
Awesome.
But stuff like this, you've got to, I don't know, there's probably documentation somewhere. I just end up reading the code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's other weirdness too, right? Like this is ID, client ID and client secret, but Canvas calls it ID and key. I don't know why. They just do.
That is interesting.
So you have to be aware of the different nuances people will name things differently sometimes, which is kind of a pain. But okay,
That was it.
that was it.